Are you stressed about visiting the doctor's office? Do you have anxiety about using hypodermic needles? Do you wish there was an easier, less painful way of receiving vaccinations? If so, we've got the drug delivery technology for you. Introducing the microneedle, a new technology that will deliver vaccines, biotherapeutics, and low molecular weight drugs on the micron scale. Currently, hypodermic needles are the most widely used device to deliver vaccines. However, these needles cannot be easily used by all patients and many times require a trained user. Hypodermic needles can also cause pain and discomfort and become troublesome when users experience trypnophobia, the fear of needles. Another major concern with hypodermic needles is the potential for the spread of bloodborne pathogens from reuse. Extensive research on microneedles has been in the works for roughly the last 20 years. Research and development of microneedles has led to innovative improvements in their design. Compared to current needles, microneedles make administration of vaccines and other materials less painful and more comforting to those suffering from trypnophobia. Since the microneedles are on the micron scale, patient compliance and safety can be improved when using the device. Here's Dr. Prausnitz to tell us a little bit more about microneedle application.
We like to use the forearm as the site for vaccination. So in the clinical trial, for example, that we're going to be starting soon, that will be the place where people will self-administer the flu vaccine patches. And the way it works is like this. So you expose your forearm, take a patch, and peel it off. You stick it on and give it a good push. Then you leave it in place. I won't leave it for 15 minutes, but that's how long we would leave it in place. The needles will go into the skin. They'll dissolve in the skin, releasing the vaccine. And then when you're done, you can peel it off and just throw it away, because the needles that were on there are now dissolved in your skin, and they've administered the vaccine. And this has nothing sharp on it, so you can just discard it in the trash.
They can also help with precise delivery of medication to specific tissues in the body. They have also been designed to deliver bioactives into cells and eyes. Where should the vaccine go?
It turns out that if you put a vaccine in the skin, in general, it's more effective than if you put it in the muscle. There's some immune system cells that are in the skin that better uptake the vaccine and process it and generate a stronger immune response. So there's also that kind of advantage for just a better therapy.
The microneedle can work in one of 4 different ways. The 4 types of microneedles are solid microneedles, coat microneedles, dissolving microneedles, and hollow microneedles. The solid microneedles penetrate the stratum corneum layer of the skin, and the medicine is applied on the permeable skin via the patch or other formulations. Coat microneedles have medicine coated on the microneedle themselves. This medicine will be released in the skin upon application. In dissolving microneedles, the medicine is encapsulated within the biocompatible polymer and will dissolve in the skin of the patients for controlled or delayed release of the drug. Here's some more information about dissolving microneedles.
If we want to make microneedles that dissolve in the skin, then it's more complicated because, well, metal's no longer an option. So we'll use a polymer. We'll be limited by polymers that are water soluble, that are safe in the body, because unlike the metal needle goes in and comes out, the dissolving needle stays in. And so it's really have an even greater safety requirement as a result of that.
The hollow microneedle is a mini version of the hypodermic needle, in which the drug will be injected into the capillary bed by a modified syringe or pump. The solid microneedle and coat microneedle need mechanical strength, so they can be made with metal using the existing microfabrication technology used to make integrated circuits. This method is very cheap and easy to scale up. Dr. Prausnitz, what are some important properties of microneedles?
There are a few different kinds of microneedles, and depending on the design of the microneedle, you would use different materials for it. So one of the key properties that a microneedle has to have is mechanical strength. And that is then balanced also with the geometry and especially the tip of the microneedle. So that when the microneedle is pressed against the skin will deform, and the skin is not rigid. And so if you make the microneedle tip very sharp, and you make the aspect ratio of the needle very high, so it's sort of long and thin with a sharp tip, that helps you. That means the force you need to puncture the skin is less. And so you don't deform it much and the needle goes in, and then your mechanical strength requirements are less because you don't have to apply that much force to get the needle in. On the other hand, if your needle is more blunt, then you're going to have to push harder, and your needle may have to be longer to overcome the deformation of the skin. And so now you'll have to have a harder time designing your needle with more constraints if your tip is blunt. So the first goal is make your tip as sharp as possible. Then, once you have that, then you know what your mechanical strength constraints are. We will typically use, for a needle that isn't intended to dissolve in the skin, we'll use metal. Metal is, you can fabricate it in all kinds of controlled ways. Metals are strong, so we'll use stainless steel typically. That's used in the body a lot. So that actually makes life a lot easier.
Dip coating is a fairly simple method to adhere medication to solid microneedles. The 3 steps involved in this process include immersion, withdrawal, and drainage and evaporation. During immersion, the microneedles are dipped into the coating solution. In withdrawal, the microneedles are removed from the solution at a constant speed. A thicker film is produced in this process when the microneedles are removed at a higher velocity and the coating solution is more viscous. Next, the excess coating will drain from the microneedles and the solvent from the solution evaporates and creates the solid coating. Another method of microneedle fabrication involves a PDMS microneedle mold. First, holes are drilled into an injection molded plastic substrate and the needles are placed into the holes with a liquid adhesive, creating the master template. The needles are then immersed into the PDMS mixture in a petri dish. The amount of PDMS mixture in the petri dish controls the height of the final mold. Next, the PDMS mixture is cured in a convection oven for an extended amount of time. The cured PDMS mold is removed from the master template and is now ready to create more microneedles. In this instance, PLA was used to form the microneedles because it is both mechanically strong enough to insert into the skin and biodegradable. Microneedles can be made from polymer, silicone, or metal. However, according to expert Dr. Prausnitz,
so there's a lot of constraints on the materials based on the safety issues and then the mechanical strength issues, the processability issues. We have to be able to fill it into a mold and dry it and have it retain its shape. It can't contract a lot and deform or something like that. It has to remain stable during the storage. In the end, the materials that we use are generally in 2 categories. One of them is water-soluble biomedical polymers. So for example, we've used polyvinyl pyrrolidone, we've used carboxymethylcellulose, we've used polyvinyl alcohol. Those are some examples. And then we'll usually have, in addition, a sugar. Sucrose, trehalose, for example. And those sugars are there for 2 reasons. One is that sugars are really water soluble, so the needle will dissolve faster if you have the sugar in it. And the other reason is that often we're putting drugs, and they're often biomolecules within the microneedle, and sugars will often be useful in stabilizing biomolecules so that they don't become damaged during the manufacturing process.
the biggest advantages of using a microneedle are that they are easy to self-administer and do not hurt. Here's just how easy it is.
So I brought a few microneedle patches here. These are some of the fully assembled patches. So it's the patch with a tab that you can grab onto, and there is a plastic protective cover that's on it. So this is they would also be stored inside of a protective pouch. So you peel open the pouch, that would reveal this, and then you can peel the microneedle off from its plastic protective cover, which then reveals the microneedle patch. And if your eyes are good and you can see there are 100 little needles that are on there that in this case they don't contain any drug, but the needles would contain the drug or the vaccine, which then the patient can just take and self-apply, having those needles puncture into the skin.
This is critical because it makes people more likely to actually receive treatment. Some of the other advantages are that there is no risk of disease spread as with hypodermic needles. They are easy to dispose of since the needles dissolve. They can be produced rather cheaply, and they can perhaps reduce the dose required since delivery to the skin is more efficient than to the muscle. The biggest application for this technology is in the administration of vaccines to regions that do not have easy access to medical personnel. With microneedles, no training is required and treatment doesn't have to be expensive. This could be particularly useful to people with diabetes for insulin injections. Another valuable application is in simply being used instead of hypodermic needles. This will get rid of the pain and fear associated with doctors' visits and vaccinations. The question now is, when can we expect to see microneedles on the market?
I could envision maybe by 2020 there could be an approval of the product.
You should not use microneedles if you have not been instructed by a physician for proper use. Make sure a proper dosage has been prescribed. Microneedles are very small and could very easily be used to injure yourself or someone else if used incorrectly. The microneedle tip is small enough that it could be broken off and left under the skin. A treatment given with a microneedle may cause inflammation at the injection site, and your physician should be contacted if inflammation persists. If you are prone to allergies or have sensitive skin, make sure to tell your doctor before using a microneedle. Keep microneedles away from at-risk users, such as children and the elderly, and make sure they are properly disposed of after use.